The subjugation. Captain Alina Reeves kept her face expressionless as Grand Overseer Taxel's spindly fingers tapped against the conference table. The Vraxian's 4 iridescent eyes blinked in their unsettling asynchronous pattern. A gesture she'd learned indicated amusement or condescension, usually both. "You must understand, Captain," Taxel said, his translator converting the series of clicks and whistles into flat English, "that biological classifications are immutable scientific fact. Your species ranks as category descentients. Apes with ambition is merely the closest conceptual translation." Alina's jaw tightened, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. Behind her, Admiral Chen shifted his weight, the only outward sign of his simmering rage. The United Earth delegation had endured these status briefings monthly since first contact 3 years ago, when the massive Vraxian vessels had appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. "Scientific fact based on what metrics, Grand Overseer?" Alina asked. "Humans have mastered nuclear fusion, achieved faster-than-light travel independently, and developed quantum computing. The Vraxians' upper limbs performed a dismissive wave. Rudimentary achievements, and quite recent. Your species spent most of its evolutionary history using sticks as tools and huddling in caves. The Vraxian Imperium had mapped 1,000 galaxies before your kind discovered electricity. It was the same conversation they'd been having since the Vraxians arrived, announcing themselves as representatives of the dominant civilization in this arm of the galaxy. Their technology had been so advanced that Earth's combined military forces hadn't even registered as a threat. "Regardless of your classification system," Admiral Chen cut in, his voice steady despite his obvious anger. "The mining operations in South America and Africa exceed the parameters outlined in our agreement. Your harvesters are destroying critical ecosystems and displacing millions." All 4 of Taxel's eyes narrowed, the pupils contracting to pinpoints. "The agreement grants us access to resources necessary for imperial expansion. If your leadership finds the terms unsatisfactory, perhaps they should have negotiated more effectively." The implied insult was clear. Earth's governments, faced with technology centuries beyond their comprehension, had capitulated to most of the Vraxian demands. What choice did they have? The aliens had demonstrated their power by casually redirecting an asteroid that would have struck Mars, altering its course with energy emissions that human instruments couldn't even properly measure. "We request a review of the territorial limitations," Alina pressed, sliding forward a data tablet showing documented violations, "and compensation for the communities displaced by your recent expansions." Taxel didn't even glance at the tablet. "I will convey your concerns to the Imperial Council, but I must remind you that Category D species are granted representation only as a courtesy. Your opinions carry no binding weight." After the meeting, Alina stood with Admiral Chen on the observation deck of the Geneva United Earth headquarters, watching the Vraxian embassy. A towering structure of impossible architecture that seemed to defy gravity, its crystalline surfaces refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns across the skyline. "They're not just mining resources," she said quietly. Chen nodded grimly. "Intelligence confirms it. The extraction pattern doesn't match simple resource gathering. They're clearing areas, creating infrastructure." "Colonization," Alina said, the word heavy in her mouth. "We think so. The Vraxians view Earth as they would any other resource world inhabited by a lesser species. Their history with other worlds suggests they'll gradually displace us to reservations once they've established sufficient presence." Alina turned to face the Admiral. "Then we need to accelerate Project Prometheus." Project Prometheus had begun as a desperate contingency plan, a way for humanity to preserve something of itself if the Vraxians decided that Earth would be more valuable without its indigenous population. But over time, it had evolved into something more ambitious. Deep beneath the lunar surface, hidden from Vraxian observation posts, scientists and engineers from every nation worked tirelessly to understand and reverse engineer alien technology from whatever scraps they could salvage. Dr. Katri made a breakthrough. Chen said, engaging his neural implant security protocols to prevent eavesdropping. Something about the way Vraxian ships manipulate gravitational fields. She thinks they've overlooked an application. What kind of application? The kind that might give us a fighting chance. 2 days later, Elena stood in the cavernous underground laboratory of Lunar Base Olympus, watching as Dr. Amara Khatri explained her findings to the assembled military and scientific leadership of Project Prometheus. The Vraxians use a form of gravitational manipulation for their FTL drives. Dr. Khatri explained, her holographic displays showing complex equations and field models. But they've optimized it solely for transportation. They're technologically stagnant. They haven't had to innovate in millennia because no species has challenged them. And you found a way to weaponize it? Asked General Rodriguez. Dr. Khatri's expression tightened. Not exactly. But I discovered that the same principles could be applied to affect stellar bodies, specifically to trigger specific types of solar activity. The implication hung in the air for a moment before Elena voiced it. You're saying we could target their sun? Theoretically, Khatri confirmed. A precisely calibrated gravitometric pulse could induce a massive coronal ejection directed at their homeworld. Not enough to destroy the star, but enough to devastate their planet's infrastructure and defensive systems. That's extreme, Elena said, though part of her felt a grim satisfaction at the possibility. It's survival, Chen countered. We've intercepted enough of their communications to know they consider Earth a temporary shared space. Their long-term plans classify us as relocatable fauna. Elena had seen the translated documents. The Vraxians had a 1,000-year plan to gradually concentrate humans into smaller and smaller territories while they transformed Earth to better suit Vraxian biology. They didn't consider it genocide, just efficient resource management. How long would it take to develop this technology? Elena asked. With current resources, 2 years at minimum, Khatri replied. And we'd need more data on Vraxian celestial mechanics to properly calibrate it. Then we need to accelerate intelligence gathering, Elena decided. And we need to find a way to test the technology without alerting them. As the meeting continued, Elena's thoughts drifted to her father, who had been among the first casualties of the Vraxian arrival. He'd been a cultural anthropologist in Mumbai when the initial Vraxian survey teams had cordoned off parts of the city for cultural assessment. When he protested their removal of artifacts from a museum, they had simply stunned him with some kind of neural disruptor. He'd never regained consciousness, becoming one of thousands of regrettable incidents during the integration period. The Vraxians had dismissed these deaths as unfortunate misunderstandings, comparing them to the accidental stepping on insects. They hadn't even understood why humans were upset. Elena refocused on the meeting as Chen outlined their next steps. Project Prometheus would need to expand its operations, taking greater risks to acquire the necessary technology and intelligence. They would need to place operatives in Vraxian facilities, intercept more communications, and somehow test Dr. Khatri's theories without detection. And they would need to do it all while continuing the charade of being the compliant primitive species that the Vraxians expected. 6 months later, Elena stood on the bridge of the covered human vessel Icarus, watching as it approached the Vraxian research outpost on Titan. The ship represented humanity's first true leap forward, a craft built with hybridized technology, incorporating Vraxian principles, but pushing them in directions the aliens had never explored. The Icarus moved silently through space, its gravitometric signature masked to appear as nothing more than background fluctuations. If Dr. Khatri's theories were correct, the Vraxians wouldn't detect them until they were already docked. This is our first real test, Admiral Chen said, joining her at the viewport. If we can infiltrate this facility, extract their stellar data, and leave undetected, it proves the concept. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the approaching Vraxian structure gleaming against Titan's hazy atmosphere. And if we're caught? Then we learn what the Vraxians do to apes who reach too far above their station. Chen replied grimly. And the rest of Project Prometheus continues without us. As the Icarus closed in on its target, Elena couldn't help but wonder how they had come to this point, secretly planning to attack a star to save their species from gradual extinction. But the alternative was to accept humanity's slow, inevitable relegation to the margins of their own world. Better to die on our feet, she whispered to herself, recalling her father's favorite phrase from the history books he'd loved, than live on our knees. The ship's systems hummed as they prepared for docking. The first true act of human defiance was about to begin. The reckoning. The Vraxian data core pulsed with an eerie blue-green light as Elena's team worked to extract its contents. The Titan research facility had proven less defended than expected. The Vraxians so confident in their technological superiority that they hadn't considered the possibility of infiltration by a Category D species. 2 minutes until shift change. Lieutenant Diaz warned, monitoring the facility's internal communications from her position by the door. "We need to move," Elena urged. Dr. Catri's fingers moved rapidly across the interface she designed to communicate with Vraxian systems. Almost there. Their stellar mechanics database is massive. I'm only grabbing the sections on their home system and gravitometric theory. Elena kept her eyes on the corridor outside, pulse rifle ready. The weapon was another Prometheus creation, human design, enhanced with principles derived from studying Vraxian technology. Its energy signature was calibrated to disrupt Vraxian neural patterns without permanent damage. They weren't killers. Not yet, anyway. "Got it," Chatri announced, disconnecting the quantum storage device from the data core. The blue-green light stabilized as the system automatically repaired the evidence of intrusion. The team moved swiftly back through the maintenance corridors they used to enter, avoiding the main passages where Vraxian workers would be transitioning between shifts. Elena took point, leading them through the labyrinthine structure back toward their docking port. They were halfway there when the alarm sounded. "Not us," Diaz said immediately, checking her scanner. "Environmental alert in processing section 7. Unrelated, but..." The alert meant movement. Vraxian security personnel responding to the emergency. As they approached the final junction before the docking area, Elena held up a closed fist, signaling the team to halt. Around the corner, she could hear the distinctive clicking speech of Vraxians. She risked a quick glance and saw 3 security officers blocking their path to the Icarus. "Options," she subvocalized into her comm. "Alternate route through the coolant maintenance shaft," Diaz suggested, sending the path to her heads-up display. "Adds 4 minutes," Chatri countered. "The ship's masking field only has 5 minutes of power left at full strength." Elena made the decision. "We engage. Non-lethal. Diaz, take right. Nguyen, left. I'll center. Chatri, stay back with the data." On her signal, they moved simultaneously into the corridor. The Vraxian guards reacted quickly, but not quickly enough. The pulse rifles fired with a soft thump sound, sending focused energy that disrupted the aliens' neural patterns. 2 dropped immediately. The third managed to reach for its communication device before Nguyen's second shot took it down. "Move," Elena ordered, leading them past the unconscious guards to the airlock where the Icarus waited. Once aboard, the ship detached smoothly from the facility and accelerated away, its revolutionary engines engaging to carry them beyond Vraxian sensor range before the masking field failed. "Did we trigger any alarms?" Elena asked as they reached a safe distance. "Negative," the ship's pilot reported. "As far as their systems show, a minor environmental issue occurred, and 3 guards failed to respond to the all-clear. By the time they piece it together, we'll be halfway to Earth." Dr. Chatri was already at a workstation, examining the stolen data. "This is it," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Detailed gravitometric analyses of their home star, orbital mechanics of their planets, everything we need to calibrate the device." "Then it's possible?" Chen asked, joining them on the bridge. "More than possible," Chatri replied. "Their star, they call it Vrax Prime, is particularly susceptible to the kind of manipulation I theorized. It's an older star with an unstable corona. With the right gravitometric pulse at the correct coordinates, we could trigger a coronal mass ejection 100 times more powerful than anything Earth has ever experienced. The implications hung in the air. Such an event wouldn't destroy the star, but it would devastate the Vraxian homeworld, potentially killing billions and certainly crippling their empire's center of power. How long to build the device? Elena asked. With this data and the materials we've been gathering, 8 months, Chatri estimated. But we'll need a delivery system. The device has to be positioned precisely relative to the star. The Icarus was just the beginning, Chen said. We've been developing a long-range vessel with enhanced versions of the same technology. The Prometheus itself. Over the next 6 months, humanity's secret resistance expanded its operations. Small teams infiltrated Vraxian facilities throughout the solar system, gathering technology and intelligence while testing the aliens' vulnerabilities. Project Prometheus evolved from a defensive contingency into an offensive strategy. All while on the surface, humans continued to play the role of the compliant primitive species. Elena found herself in an increasingly complex position. By day, she attended diplomatic meetings with Vraxian officials, maintaining the facade of cooperation even as the aliens expanded their control over Earth's resources. By night, she coordinated operations from the hidden lunar base, overseeing the development of technologies that might save humanity. The double life wore on her. Sometimes she caught herself almost believing the Vraxian propaganda, that humans were indeed primitive compared to their ancient civilization, that perhaps managed integration was the best outcome possible. But then she would visit one of the temporary relocation zones in what had once been Central Africa, seeing thousands of displaced people living in prefabricated shelters while Vraxian harvesters tore apart their ancestral lands, and her resolve would harden again. The construction of the gravitometric pulse device, now codenamed Sunforge, progressed ahead of schedule thanks to breakthroughs derived from the stolen data. Dr. Chatri and her team worked tirelessly, testing components in the shielded chambers beneath the lunar surface. The principle is elegant, Chatri explained during one briefing. We create a focused gravitometric distortion that resonates with the star's own magnetic field, amplifying natural instabilities. The energy release will be directed primarily toward the Vraxian homeworld. And the effects? Elena asked. A coronal mass ejection of unprecedented magnitude, Chatri said. Electromagnetic radiation would fry their planetary defense systems. Thermal effects would destroy surface infrastructure. Atmospheric ionization would disrupt their communications for years. Their civilization would be knocked back centuries, if not millennia. As the launch date for Operation Sunforge approached, the ethical implications weighed heavily on Elena. In a private meeting with Admiral Chen and United Earth President Amara, she voiced her concerns. We're talking about potentially billions of lives, she said. Even if they see us as primitive, does that justify this level of response? What's the alternative? Chen asked. We've intercepted their latest directives. The integration is accelerating. The first mass relocations are scheduled to begin next month. President Amara, her face lined with the weight of her office, spoke softly. I've authorized one final diplomatic approach. We'll reveal some of what we know, not about Sunforge, but about their plans for Earth. We'll make it clear that we're not as primitive as they believe, and we'll offer peaceful coexistence. And if they refuse? Elena asked. Then we proceed with Sunforge, Amara said, her voice resolute. I won't preside over the slow extinction of our species. 3 days later, Elena sat across from Grand Overseer Taxel in what would be their final meeting. This time, she arrived with a different demeanor, no longer the compliant diplomat, but the representative of a species fighting for its survival. We know about the accelerated integration plan, she said without preamble, sliding forward a tablet containing copies of the Vraxians' own documents. We know about the reservation system, the terraforming protocols, the population management directives. Taxel's 4 eyes widened momentarily before narrowing. How did you obtain these documents? That's not important, Elena replied. What matters is that we understand your true intentions for Earth and humanity. We're offering you a choice: revise your plans and establish a genuine partnership with us, or face consequences. Consequences. Taxel's translator couldn't entirely filter the derision in his voice. Your species is in no position to issue ultimatums, Captain Reeves. Your technological capacity is centuries behind ours. You've underestimated us, Elena said, just as you've underestimated every lesser species you've encountered. That arrogance may be your undoing. This meeting is concluded, Taxel said, rising. I will report your insubordination to the Imperial Council. Expect adjustments to your species status. As Elena left the Vraxian embassy for the last time, she activated her secure comm. It's done. They're not backing down. Understood, came Chen's response. Sunforge is a go. 2 weeks later, Elena stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as it prepared to depart from the hidden shipyard on the far side of the moon. The vessel represented the pinnacle of human innovation, combining reverse-engineered Vraxian technology with human ingenuity to create something the aliens had never imagined. At its heart was the Sunforge device, a complex arrangement of gravitometric emitters designed to focus their effect on a single point in space, the corona of Vrax Prime. Final systems check complete, reported Commander Rivera from the operations station. All systems nominal. Masking field at maximum efficiency. Vraxian patrols? Elena asked. Standard pattern. They've detected nothing. Elena took a deep breath, the weight of what they were about to do settling heavily on her shoulders. Proceed with launch sequence. The Prometheus slipped away from Earth, its revolutionary drive allowing it to accelerate to FTL speeds much closer to planetary bodies than Vraxian technology permitted. By the time the aliens detected the anomalous energy signature, the human vessel was already beyond their reach. The journey to the Vraxian home system took 17 days. 17 days for Elena to contemplate the magnitude of their response. 17 days to question whether they had truly exhausted all alternatives. But with each passing hour, updates from Earth confirmed the Vraxians were accelerating their plans, beginning the first forced relocations of human populations in South America. We're approaching the target coordinates, Rivera announced as the Prometheus dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Vraxian system, far enough from standard routes to avoid immediate detection. Initiate final approach, Elena ordered. Maintain masking field at maximum. The ship moved silently through the outer reaches of the system, its presence concealed by technology the Vraxians didn't believe humans capable of developing. Their destination wasn't the Vraxian homeworld itself, but a carefully calculated position where the Sunforge device would have maximum effect on the star. Position achieved, Rivera reported several hours later. We are at optimal deployment coordinates. Elena looked at the main view screen, which showed the distant Vrax Prime, a red giant star that had nurtured the Vraxian civilization for millennia. Somewhere in its light, the Vraxian homeworld orbited, its billions of inhabitants unaware of what was about to happen. Last chance, she said quietly to Admiral Chen, who stood beside her. Are we certain this is our only option? Chen's face was grim. The Vraxians gave their answer when they started the relocations. They don't see us as equals, just another primitive species to be managed and eventually replaced. If we don't act now, humanity becomes a footnote in their imperial history. Elena nodded, then turned to Dr. Katri at the science station. Deploy the Sunforge device. The ship shuddered slightly as the massive device detached from its housing and moved into position. Once stabilized, its gravitometric emitters began powering up, creating distortions in spacetime too subtle for standard Vraxian sensors to detect. Device is online, Chaftry reported. Initiating calibration sequence. For almost an hour, the Sunforge device adjusted its output, finding the precise frequency that would resonate with Vrax Prime's natural instabilities. On the view screen, the star appeared unchanged, its massive red bulk burning as it had for billions of years. Calibration complete, Chatri finally announced. The device is ready. Elena looked around the bridge, at the faces of humans who represented their species' last desperate gambit for survival. Activate Sunforge. Activating now, Chatri confirmed, her fingers moving across the control interface. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, instruments began detecting changes in the star's electromagnetic field, subtle at first, then increasingly dramatic. "It's working," Chatri said, her voice a mixture of awe and horror. "The stellar disturbance is propagating exactly as predicted." On the view screen, the surface of Vrax Prime began to roil, massive prominences forming and breaking apart. Then, with stunning violence, an enormous flare erupted from the star's surface, directed like a cosmic blowtorch toward the Vraxian homeworld. Energy release exceeding predictions by 30%, Chatri reported as the bridge crew watched in stunned silence. Impact on the Vraxian homeworld in approximately 8 minutes. Elena felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a hollow certainty that they had done what was necessary for survival. Recall the device and prepare for immediate departure. We need to be back in FTL before they can organize a response. As the Prometheus recovered the Sunforge device and prepared to leave the system, long-range sensors captured the first effects of their attack. The coronal mass ejection slammed into the Vraxian homeworld's magnetosphere, overwhelming it completely. Massive electromagnetic storms swept across the planet, disabling defense systems, power grids, and communications networks in cascading failures. They're broadcasting distress signals on all frequencies, communications reported. Their orbital defenses are completely offline. The Vraxian fleet, Elena asked, scattered throughout their empire. The nearest battle group is 3 days from their homeworld. Elena nodded. Take us home. 3 months later, Elena stood in the Oval Office with Admiral Chen and Dr. Chatri as President Amara prepared to address the world. The aftermath of Operation Sunforge had unfolded faster than anyone had anticipated. The Vraxian homeworld, while not destroyed, had suffered catastrophic damage to its infrastructure. Millions had died in the initial impact, with millions more in the chaos that followed. More importantly, the Empire's central command structure had been crippled, leaving their forces throughout the galaxy disorganized and isolated. When a Vraxian delegation arrived at Earth 2 weeks after the attack, they came not as conquerors but as negotiators. For the first time, they addressed humans as equals. "The Vraxian ambassador is waiting," an aide announced. President Amara nodded. "Show him in." The Vraxian who entered was not Taxel, but a senior imperial diplomat named Verix. He moved with the careful deliberation of one who had learned respect the hard way. "President Amara," he began, his translator conveying a formality absent in previous Vraxian communications. "The Imperial Council has authorized me to continue our negotiations for a permanent peace between our peoples. We remain committed to finding a peaceful resolution," Amara replied, "provided your empire acknowledges Earth's sovereignty and humanity's equal status." Verix's 4 eyes blinked in synchronization, a gesture Elena had never seen before, which their cultural experts suggested indicated deep respect or submission. "The Council has accepted your terms in principle," he said. "The recent demonstration of your capabilities has led to a reassessment of human classification. You are now recognized as Category A sentients, with all associated rights and protections." After the meeting, Elena found herself alone with Chen on the White House balcony, looking up at the night sky, where, somewhere among the stars, the Vraxian Empire was reorganizing itself around a new understanding of the cosmic hierarchy. "Do you think they've really changed?" she asked. "Or are they just biding their time?" Chen considered the question. "I think they're genuinely terrified. They never imagined that primitive apes could strike directly at their homeworld. Their entire worldview was built on the certainty of their superiority. And we shattered that certainty. Completely. The question now is what kind of relationship we build from here." Elena thought about the billions of lives on both sides, human and Vraxian, and the precipice they had all stood upon. Not conquest, not revenge, just equality and respect. "It's a start," Chen said, "and sometimes that's all you need." As they stood in silence, Elena reflected on humanity's journey from subjugation to revolution, how they had been forced to become something terrible to prevent something worse. The apes had not only learned to use fire, they had learned to burn stars. And the galaxy would never be the same.